I'm going to not tell you the truth about what can happen when you get a hernia repair with surgical mesh. The truth is there are at least 13 things that can go wrong. So if you have a hernia right now and you're thinking about getting it fixed, this is for you now. 1. Mesh is high risk. You know, they say everything in life is a risk-benefit analysis. Well, no. One thing you need to know about mesh is that it is high risk. With any surgery, there is always some level of risk, but mesh carries with it an additional level of risk. So just realize that going into it. And I don't think people really realize how risky mesh is. It's extremely high risk. So I'm just telling you, be aware. Number 2, mesh is a foreign object. That means it's not made from your body tissue. It's made from polypropylene, polyester, nylon, sometimes metal. These are all synthetic materials. And so, because it's a synthetic material, it's a foreign body in your body. Your body doesn't recognize it as normal tissue. And so your body will attack it and try to get rid of it. And what happens is you start developing scar tissue around the mesh, which can cause all sorts of problems. So just know that it is a foreign object in your body that will cause your body to have a reaction to it. No. 3. Mesh causes inflammation. So what happens is because it's a foreign object, like we just talked about, and also because it is very rigid and stiff and it tears and frays just like any fabric would. That will cause a significant inflammatory response. And you've heard me talk about inflammation. If you watch my videos, you know how important it is to keep inflammation low in your body, especially if you have chronic pain or if you have arthritis. But mesh is notorious for causing a major inflammatory response in the body, which leads to a lot of different types of symptoms and problems. So, no, 3 is inflammation. No. 4. Mesh can trigger autoimmune responses and illnesses. So, because of that big inflammatory response that we just talked about, it can trigger certain autoimmune processes in the body and actually cause you to develop autoimmune-type symptoms. So, maybe you were someone who was perfectly healthy, you had no problems, and then you got your hernia repair, and then all of a sudden you started having joint pain. You started feeling fatigued all the time, you started losing hair on your body. You started having digestive issues. All of these can be symptoms of an autoimmune process being triggered by that giant inflammatory response that we talked about earlier. So, it can definitely trigger autoimmune illnesses. No. 5. Loss of mobility. Have you ever had a hernia? You know what it feels like. It can be pretty annoying. It's usually not too bad, but if you do a lot of physical activity, if you're on your feet all day, it can get pretty painful and it can be annoying. But what happens with the mesh is it actually ends up restricting your movement even more than having the hernia itself. So many people end up feeling like they have less mobility after the mesh surgery than they did before. And so that's something to consider. Like if you're a very active person, you might actually have less mobility after the surgery than you did before. No. 6. Loss of fertility. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you're a man, this doesn't apply to you. But if you're a woman and you have a female pelvic mesh, it can significantly affect your fertility. And unfortunately, that information isn't really given out very well. They do tell you that until after you have the surgery, and then all of a sudden you find out that, yeah, maybe we should have talked about that beforehand. So if you're a woman and you have a female pelvic mesh, be aware that it can significantly affect your ability to conceive a child. Number 7, impacts on sexual function. So whether you're male or female, it can significantly impact your sexual function. For women, it can affect their libido. It can affect their sensitivity in the area. It can cause dryness. For men, it can cause erectile dysfunction. It can cause a decrease in libido. So, bottom line is it can significantly affect sexual function. And unfortunately, again, this is something that's not talked about until after you have the surgery. And by then, it's too late. So please write down all of these points and share them with someone who needs to hear them. Now. 8. Chronic pain. Mesh is infamous for causing chronic pain. And so many people end up having the surgery to fix a hernia, which is annoying and it hurts a little bit, but it's not terrible. And then they end up with this mesh implant and then they end up in chronic pain. And it's hard to understand unless you've been through it. But it's a real phenomenon. It happens to so many people. And so many people are suffering with chronic pain after a mesh implant. No. 9. Constipation. Mesh can cause constipation. How can that be? Well, if you have abdominal mesh, it can affect the nerves in the area and it can slow down your entire digestive process. And so it can lead to constipation, which is annoying. But constipation can be a serious issue, especially if you have severe constipation where you're not having regular bowel movements and you have to strain a lot and you have to use laxatives. So, mesh can affect your entire digestive process and it can cause constipation. Number 10. Bowel obstruction. So, sometimes the mesh actually ends up adhering to the intestines and it can cause an obstruction in the bowel. And so, if this happens, you can get severely constipated. You can have terrible stomach pain. You could end up needing another surgery to go in there and to fix the problem. So, it can definitely cause bowel obstructions. Number 11. Urinary incontinence. That means leakage of urine, dribbling, having an inability to hold your pee. Mesh can definitely cause that. And again, it's not something that's talked about until after you have the surgery. And it's one of those things that once you have it, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So just be aware of that. If you have urinary incontinence, it can get worse with the mesh. Number 12. Nerve damage. Mesh can cause nerve damage and it can cause numbness, tingling, burning pins and needles, sharp shooting pains. And so anything that has to do with nerves can be a problem. Nerves can regenerate, but sometimes they don't, and then you're stuck with permanent nerve damage. So just realize that it can definitely cause nerve damage. Number 13. Opioid dependency. This is not something that's really talked about much, but the studies show that it happens. A lot of people become dependent on opioids after mesh surgery. And this is not just with hernia mesh, this is with any kind of mesh. But what happens is you take the opioids for a week or two after the surgery, and then you stop taking them, and then a week or two after that. You start getting horrible pain, and then you start taking more opioids, and then you start becoming dependent on them. And it is something that is not really talked about until it happens to you, and then you're stuck in this cycle of addiction and dependency. So just be aware of that. And number 14, permanent disability. So the studies show that mesh can cause permanent disability in 13% of the people who get it. And that is a huge number. That's 1 out of every 7 people. And so it's something that you want to be aware of. You want to know about it ahead of time so you can make an informed decision. I hope this video helps you. Please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it. And I'll see you next time.